All right, good morning, everyone. My name is Kurt Dirks. I am the Kurt Dean of the Business School this fall and a professor here also. And so I want to welcome you all to one of the events that's really kind of central to our mission, which is thinking about being a thought leader in business. And we do this from many different ways. In fact, yesterday I know a few of you were here for the chairman and CEO of Union Pacific to talk about international trade. So that's one angle we do it. Another angle today is about bringing our faculty to, who are doing really world-class research to think about that angle of it. And so, and then putting together people from the local business community to understand what's the impact from them, involving them in the conversation as well as our students. And then bringing all those three audiences together is really kind of central to what we do here. On the faculty side, we really do have, believe it or not, the world-class faculty right here in St. Louis, and that's something that perhaps not everyone appreciates as much, and that's why we try to do this series, is to try to get everyone to appreciate our faculty, what they do, how they're leading thinking in their respective fields. And we'll hear from Julia in just a few minutes about a very timely topic on health insurance and some of the implications on that. But the business research series takes, people may wonder, what do faculty do all day? Are they in the classroom all day? And they are in the classroom with our students most of the day, but they're also working on research topics in their respective areas of expertise. And to be able to, some of our faculty are better than others at being able to translate that research into a setting like this, and it's going to be one of those. And so this is the brainchild of Dick Mahoney, who's here with us today, who, as many of you know, was the CEO and chairman of Monsanto for many years. And Dick, I know, has a passion for a number of things, but one is communication and the impact of the Open Business School on the business community. And so, Dick, thank you for helping us get us started on this path. This also results in something you may have heard about before, which is the Olin Award, where our faculty, and this is one of those papers that will be in that set, looks at what is the very most impactful paper we're doing. So we have quite a big set, but the most impactful is chosen and given the Olin Award.
And some money.
And some money. It's not a bad amount of money, in fact. I was a lucky recipient of that with Jackson back one year. And so it's quite a generous thing, but even more importantly for us as a business school, to really kind of get
You get a crystal trophy, and the crystal trophy, which I designed, is an O, but it's two halves. It's two C's together, and they're almost touching. So the research is almost reaching the community, and the closer they get, the better it is.
So that part, I actually didn't know that story. That's a good story, actually. Let's go ahead around the room and just hear all who's here today, because again, one of the things I mentioned is that we really like to bring together our faculty and students and people, different members of the community. So I think we're going to have a presentation, but we're also going to have a discussion today, and so that's good to be able to know who's in the room. Can you start us off?
David Nicholas, business columnist at the St. Louis Post-Dispatch.
Juan Weld in the Financial Services Community and help small businesses.
Scott Caswell, I'm here for myself.
I'm Hal Davies. I'm with the Donald Danforth Plant Science Center.
I'm Mike Dunlap. I'm in the Financial Administration for the university.
Melody Lee, I'm a second year MBA student here.
Ted Rizika, I'm a health insurance broker for 28 years.
Devin Estes, I'm an 86th grad with Jeff, and my background's in banking.
Jeff Gench, 86th grad, private equity business.
Kathy Duncan on the faculty here teaching communication and more recently ran a public relations firm for about 25 years.
Dick Mahoney, I'm executive in residence at the Olin School.
Distinguished.
Promotion without pay.
Hi there, I'm Jackson Nickerson. I'm a professor in organization and strategy, and I run our Brookings Executive Education activity in DC.
Jack Warren, I work in supply chain strategy at Express Scripts.
And I know we also have a number of people online. This actually, we're doing an experiment today, the first simulcast of this, and so Jeff in the back there is helping us to get this simulcast. So all of you people online watching this, welcome. Online also, we'll provide some opportunities for you for questions. Today I'd like to turn the floor over to Leah Solomon. Leah joined us in 2015 from Duke University. She is in our strategy and organization area. and focuses on a number of things, but one of them is how human capital can lead to competitive advantage, and also does work on innovation. So, Julia, I'd like to turn the floor over to you.
Thank you so much.
I'm Julia Zimmerman. I'm very happy to be here, and thank you so much for giving me this opportunity to present my research, and thank you for spending this beautiful Friday morning with us. So my research, as Kurt said, is I look at how firms can utilize their most valuable resource, people. And in understanding that, this is a part of this research. In this particular research, which is co-authored with Dan Ariely and Sharon Belanzon from Duke, I look at the impact of provision of health insurance by small firms on their performance. And I try to understand so I do find that it matters whether firms provide health insurance or not. And then I try to understand what is driving this difference in performance. Why is it that health insurance provision is allowing firms to outperform other firms? Are there any also trade-offs that to be learned from this relationship? Now, employee benefits have been in the news lately, have been featured prominently in the news. For example, this is Google's cafeteria. It looks very close to what we had today. Facebook, for example, they provide all kinds of benefits. Typical laundry service, things that you're very much used to having at work. Especially the napping pods, right? This is where you go and take a nap during the day. Starbucks has been featured for tuition assistance. They were providing their full-time employees, their qualified employees, they're paying for their tuition and helping them get through college. And this infographic, I don't expect you to read all of it. It just highlights all the types of different benefits that are supposedly very good for both firms and employees, right? Free office equipment, bring your pet to work every day. So that these things, basically, the assumption behind being featured in the news prominently is basically that these providing employee benefits is good for both employees and firms. But is that really true? Typical debate, Costco versus Walmart. Costco, is it really a good strategy, right, to give more to the employees? And part of the debate, basically, this graph is showing that Costco pays more, provides more employees with health insurance, provides more vacation days, takes care of the employees, and they're saying that Costco is actually doing better than Walmart, right? Lower turnover, labor costs, actually lower as part of the sales, higher profits per employees. But we all know that Walmart is not really doing badly after all, right? And this strategy is actually working for them. So the question becomes, is it really, what is behind this argument? Do we really want to take the assumption that providing benefits to employees is unilaterally a good thing? Okay. So in this paper, I look at the health insurance as employment benefit. And I asked this question whether provision of health insurance benefits make a good business sense for all firms. My setting is small firms for a reason, because as you will see in the following slides, small firms have greatest variation in provision of health care. And I look at outcomes such as profitability, labor productivity, growth, and employee turnover. So let me give you a little bit of background about the provision of the insurance. I know the industry has changed quite a bit. The institutional environment has changed quite a bit from the period of my study to today. This study is actually focusing on the Pre-Affordable Care Act period before 2015. The study runs from 2006 to 2011. And a good part, the advantage of focusing on pre-ACA period is because with Affordable Care Act, a lot of employers with 50 employees or more now, they're required to provide health insurance. So this period allows me to look at small firms in the period when they were not required to provide health insurance. So I'm examining the strategic voluntary provision decision of firms to provide health insurance to their employees. So since World War II, 1943, there were tax advantages. So the IRS introduced tax advantages for employer-provided health insurance. So that spurred this interesting structure in the industry where most of the insurance coverage is provided by the employers. This is quite unusual, as you probably know, insurance in the insurance industry from other countries, right? U.S. is specifically unique in that way. There are a lot of historical reasons behind it, so part of it, and this is the coverage that we have results in today. Over 50% of all insured people, they get employer-sponsored insurance, and the rest is through Medicare, Medicaid, and other private coverage. Now, to understand the landscape and significance, economic significance of the study, let me say that there are 5 million firms in the U.S. Out of these, if you separate and see how the labor market is distributed across these firms, you will see that small businesses, this is the under 500 employees, they employ about 77% of the labor force. The rest is made up of the larger, more established firms that we are more familiar with today. Out of these firms, 67% of small businesses provide health insurance to their employees. 99% of larger firms provide health insurance to their employees. So the real variation in provision of health insurance is coming from these small firms. And you can see the significant share of the labor force that it is actually affecting. So if we wanted to, this is, by the way, is not an electoral college map. I don't think this was what it looked like on Tuesday night. But this is basically showing the variation of insurance coverage, insurance provision to employees by firm size. So these are small employers, and you can see Missouri is shaded light blue. This means that in Missouri, about 35% of small employers in 2013 were offering health insurance to their employees. And some states offer more, that would be the dark blue states, and some offer less. So the variation is, you can see, is quite great across the country.
How do you get up to the high number you have? I guess it's just heavily weighted with employees up in the blue states, huh? Your average number was 67.
Yeah, that's right, that's correct.
So there's only one category that gets that high. It's the heavy, the dark blue.
Mostly the unpopulated place, yeah.
I'll make an opinion on the state of Missouri has, I work with a lot of small companies, the first thing I talk to them about is, I want to make sure you know if you set up a group plan versus individual policies, the state law is that you have to pay for 50% of the employee only, and that scares a lot of small startup business owners. So that may be contributing to the small number.
Would you say that again?
The state of Missouri says if you set up, if you have 2 or more employees.
I've got a software company, I'm interested in this.
Yeah.
It's costing a fortune for the.
Yeah, so if you have 2 or more, to answer your question, if you have 2 or more employees, the state of Missouri says you have to offer or pay for employee-only health insurance. That's not required in every state, but the state of Missouri does.
Not family.
Not family, just employee-only. But that scares some business owners who are just starting up and getting their business up and going and say, man, that's a heavy burden to carry. so I'm gonna forego it and let my employees have individual policies. So anyways, that may constitute just an idea of why it's 35 versus some other states may not have that requirement.
Yeah, that's true.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of across state variation as well that's contributing to such a spread of, small employees. So the main point here is there's a large variation. And behind that, there are different incentives for employers to offer and not offer insurance. And what we try to understand is what is driving this decision beyond the state level environment, the legislative environment, the incentive environment. So we try to control the state type of characteristics to get to the effect. What is the behind it that makes this strategic decision possible for these employers? So why do firms provide health insurance? What do we know so far? So research and and industry have pointed to two main explanations. One is their economic incentives, so economic incentives are varying, and there's this cost argument. So there could be favorable tax policies, economies of scale, meaning that if you can tap into a large group pool, then it's more beneficial for you. It's cheaper for you to provide health insurance, and that employers are actually seeking this optimal mix of wages and benefits. So you can think about an employer could think, I can pay you more, but not provide benefits, just depending on what my employer wants. So the assumption that all employees want health insurance may not be accurate, right? For some industries in some places, most people may be covered through some, maybe through their spousal coverage, and an employer could look at their workforce and say, do they really want health insurance provision, or should I just pay them in terms of these benefits, translate them to higher wages instead, right? So there's, the question is, okay, we're gonna decide depending on employee optimal mix of what employees want and what firms can offer. The second argument is around this human resource policy, right? The idea behind it is if we take care of our employees, they will take care of us, right? So it's kind of translating into the worker motivation, worker commitment, increased worker investment in firm-specific skills, for example, which increases their likelihood that they will stay and perform better. But what they don't really, so the first argument does not really distinguish between, so it explains the difference in coverage between large firms and small firms, but it doesn't really do a good job of explaining why is it similar looking small firms who cannot get access to economies of scale, or they're say two firms that are in the same regulatory environment, why do they make these different decisions about provision of health insurance? So this is, I use the data to get to this question from a leading provider of accounting software company for small and medium-sized firms in the US. The data comprises about 15,000 small firms in the US, and as I said, the time period of the study is pre-Affordable Care Act, when provision of health care was voluntary for small firms. And I examined the difference in firm performance between firms that do provide health insurance and firms that do not. I asked two main questions here. How does health insurance affect firm performance? And what is driving this relationship? Now, when I try to understand the mechanism behind the different strategic decision to provide health insurance, I'm looking, all signs point me to look inside the firm, to understand the employment relationship in these firms. And I'll go into more detail in a few slides, but as a preview, I want to use the 2008 housing crisis, the downturn in the economy, to understand how employers change their employment relationship with their employees, to give me a hint behind this mechanism. So what do we find? Firms with health insurance have better performance. 21% more sales per employee, 1.5% more profits, 6% less employee turnover. However, what I'm finding is there's a trade-off. These firms are not growing as fast as the other firms. They're showing slower growth, 8.5% less growth. And this is employment growth. Take it in. Just to give you a gist of what we're looking at in the sample of these firms, the firms that I'm looking at on average have 15 employees. They are on average generating $1.5 million in sales, but you can see it's pretty skewed. On the median firm, it's generating about $600,000 in sales. Younger firms, about average age is 8 years old, and about 22% provide health insurance. So we do see this variation within the small firm. Now, in this regression table, the main relationships that I'm looking at is I'm looking at whether a firm that's providing health insurance what is the effect of this on various indicators of firm performance: labor productivity, profitability, employment growth, and employee turnover. So when I put all these different factors in the regression analysis to account for things like state differences, even at the MSA, metropolitan statistical area differences, main economic hubs even within the states may differ. So I try to control for different regional economic.
Did you control for the kind of industry they're in?
Yes, industry controls, year controls. So I try to think of everything that could be affecting firms equally, depending on the
The reason I'm asking, there's a lot of small companies doing a whole variety of things.
That's
and
right.
Comparing profitability of somebody that's selling oranges versus somebody who's growing apples is.
Exactly. So what I try to do is compare very much similar looking firms operating in a similar industry, similar size, in a similar area. Even within the state of Missouri, there could be different areas, have different economic growth or different economic conditions. So I try to really get into the metropolitan statistical area, economic growth, of different hubs of economic activity, and trying to control for these things. So basically here I'm comparing very similar firms operating under similar conditions. And I try, so this in here, I'm actually going to be arguing for causality. So I do a little bit more analysis that I'm not reporting here that would suggest that this is a causal relationship. So basically, firms that do provide health insurance, they actually then generate this higher profits and different performance indicators because of the health insurance.
This is one of the most important issues that we face all the time in research. Is it correlation or is it causality? Did you just get some numbers that happen to coincide with your beliefs, or did it really cause it to happen? And the acid test, besides getting data that supports your belief, is that you gotta have a reason for it. That's plausible.
Right.
And that's my acid test anyway. We teach a course at Cape Cod for journalists in the summertime. Dave has been there. And we focus on that because journalists quite often see a piece of data and conclude it caused something to happen when it just happened to be that the rooster made the sun come up. We try to teach that. So I'm always anxious to see this causality versus correlation.
Thank you so much, Dick. So here we're arguing causality, and we're trying to kind of argue with the theory and empirics, rigorous statistical analysis, that there is a causal relationship. So what I see is 21% increase in labor productivity for firms that do offer health insurance, 1.5% in profitability, employment growth is lower, and employee turnover is lower. So what is driving this relationship? Now I'm trying to understand, what is it about health insurance that could, result in these different performance indicators? Relational contracting is a central feature of employment relationships. Relational contracting is a kind of a technical term, but in a simpler term, if you think about how you actually make agreements with your employees, one, you can write this formal contracts, meaning like you hire them, you agree on the wage, you agree on the performance, right? And relational contracting is actually touching on this informal side of employment relationships. These implicit promises that are made between management and employees in terms of continuity of employment or performance expectations, all these things are covered under the relational contracting. And it is well known that, when in firms, this informal relationship has a large bearing on how employees understand their place in the organization, how they understand their role, how do they identify with the organization. These are informal agreements that govern employment relationships. Now, workplace, as I said, is a social environment. These formal contracts may not be able to fully capture these complex individual motivations. So a lot of these implicit verbal agreements happen. Sometimes they're not even verbalized. It's basically understood that in certain, for example, work groups, it's understood that you stay up late if work requires it, right? It's kind of part of the culture. It's this unwritten norms and rules that pervade in the workplace. Why is it happening? Because sometimes it's very difficult to link individual effort to outcome. On a production floor, it might be easier. You produce, and then you can see the outcome. With knowledge workers in the service, it's very hard sometimes to link individual performance and to monitor individual performance because the tasks could be interdependent. So how can you tell who contributed how much? Right? Another reason relational contracting is important is because it provides an effective tool to provide this future promises. So there could be like a career ladder that you implicitly understand in the organization, right? So if you work hard, basically, employees should know what your career ladder should be. Where is your next promotion, right? So these kind of implicit promises motivate employees to contribute more, exert effort, and compete for higher performance, right? Which may not necessarily be written in your employment contract. And the shadow of the future is a term that's basically what it means is when firms are making decisions, when employees are making decisions, they're always calculating what's going to happen one step ahead, right? So for small firms, employees are especially worried about the future. Small firms have high rate of failure. There is a lot of uncertainty. So this relational contracting allows firms to instill confidence in their employees saying, yeah, because we're committed to you, our futures are tied together. Right? So this shadow of the future is more prominent in small firms than in large firms. Large firms are survivors. They have survived, they were able to grow and they were able to survive. So it's a more stable environment versus small firms where everything is just volatile, right? There's just no certainty there. So that's why we believe that shadow of the future is much more daunting for small firms than for large firms. So how can we see this relational contract? So I'm kind of making an argument that healthcare provision, health insurance provision is part of this relational contracting. Okay, that's great, but relational contracting, just as I said, is an implicit promise. How can I see it, right? How can I see from my data what people are actually, understanding as being promised? Very hard to do. One clue that could give me an answer is I can look at the behavior of the wage changes according to economic conditions in the environment. This is what I mean. One key promise of relational contracting is to keep wages stable and shielded from market fluctuations. So that, what it means is, implicit contracting, a key feature is if I enter an implicit contract with my employees, me as a manager or as an owner, what I'm doing is I'm saying that our futures are connected. In good times, I ask my employees to take care of the firm, work harder, be committed, let's grow together. But in bad conditions, I'm promising my employees that I will be taking care of them. So we're gonna be in this together, whether the times are good or bad, right? And this would be evident through wages. Protecting your employees. I'm looking at 2008 housing crisis. Conveniently, right smack in the middle of my study period, we have, unfortunately for a lot of people, but convenient for me, we have an economic recession. So what I can see is, I can see employee wages, I can see how firms are performing, of course I can see whether they provide health insurance or not, and I can see for year to year whether the wages are changing, right? And I can see before the recession, during recession, and after recession. And I want to see, my prediction would be that firms that provide health insurance, they're probably shielding their employee wages from economic fluctuations more than firms that do not provide health insurance. So that would be an indication that there is relational contracting in place. This graph is showing an estimate of decrease in wages as the sensitivity of wages to housing index. So the housing index fluctuates. It correlates with the wages. It's been shown that housing index and wages correlate. So when the housing prices go down, you expect the wages to go down. When the housing prices go up, wages usually go up. So there's this correlation. So what I'm looking here is I'm tracing the housing index over the years. And obviously for 2008 housing crisis, the housing index fluctuated a lot. And what this graph is indicating is I'm plotting average decrease in average wages for firms. This is without health insurance, and the solid line is for firms with health insurance.
What is the metric on the vertical axis?
It's a percent decrease in wages.
Percent decrease.
Yes, percent decrease in wages. So what I see is for firms that don't provide health insurance, for every 10% decrease in housing index, they're decreasing their wages by 34% during the recession. Before the recession, you can see they're kind of going in the same direction. And then you see this large separation during the recession years. Then, in contrast, firms with health insurance, they're dropping wages only by 14%. So this is kind of an evidence of what is happening. Now, if this is actually true, and this relational contracting really matters, that we should see some kind of variation by different industries as well. So we wanted to kind of understand, okay, where would this relational contracting be most useful for employers to implement? So we separate industries by different categories of human capital. So we look at industries where it is important to have firm-specific training. And so we get these measures from different surveys asking them whether the firm-specific training is important. Now, some industries and high-specific training industries would include things like business and professional services. Low firm-specific training industries would be more routine type of industries where you come in and you just do your job, like retail, for example. There's not much really for employees to learn specifically about the firm.
Just a question, if I can pass slide. You're talking about wage shield, you're talking about headcount shielding or actual wages per employee?
This
So
is-
34%, was that, they let go, it's total payroll for the company?
It's an
Or-
average wage, that's right. So even if they had let go, for an average employee, whether the wages fell or stayed stable.
And so so your prior slide, those firms cut people's salaries by 34%?
That's
Or
right.
hourly wages by 34%?
That's right.
It might have been through the bonus structure though, probably.
So we do look at what the compensation structure to separate bonuses and pension. It is driven by salaries.
And it doesn't account for the population in the firm. So
Yes.
you could adjust the average salary by getting rid of the high wage people.
Yeah, so we actually see if it is, what is the indication of different, are they laying off, high wage employees, are they hiring more part-time workers? And what we see is the indication that they are shifting the work composition. So they are these firms without health insurance, they really don't care about the breaking implicit promises, so they're free to shift the composition of workforce. So they're hiring more part-time employees. So they did do a lot of layoffs, and in turn they replaced the people with
But if
part-time.
the person who stayed on and kept their job, how much did their wage change?
Their wages, usually there is wage rigidity in the firm, so this would probably reflect the overall accounting for the composition of the structure.
But the people who stayed on, did they get reduced in pay, or they just?
Not as much as this, but they did have cut in pay.
Yes, it's a mix.
Most are part of the mix.
Thank you.
So this is kind of indicative of either you cut your wages of existing employees, or you fire expensive employees and hire cheaper employees. So there's a lot of this change, flexibility in adjusting the structure of the employee force. So these breakdowns, basically, the point here is that it matters. You see a lot of this indication of this relational contracting, wage shielding in industries where human capital is more important to the firm, where they have to make more investment in people to get more performance out of them, right? For example, low task discretion basically refers to whether the tasks are more idiosyncratic, how much discretion do you have in doing your work, versus in that setting, it's hard to monitor employees, right? It's hard to monitor what they're producing because they have to decide, and the monetary costs are higher. But on the other hand, if the work is more routine, I mean, you can plug in any person, and then you can see the outcome very easily, then this relational contracting doesn't really matter.
May I ask a question on here?
Yes.
If you look at 2006 and 2007, we see that there's an ongoing decrease in wages, average wage, before the shock. So is it that these firms are growing and they're adding lower cost workers?
As in general trend?
Right, as a general trend in 2006 and 2007, is that why we see these numbers at 10% and 20% and whatnot?
I think it's probably more indicative of what is happening in these particular industries. So these particular industries may be decreasing wages overall, so maybe shifting workforce. There's something structural going on, but the main difference that what's striking here is this disparate effect during the recession. So what have I shown you so far? I wanted to ask two questions. One is, does health insurance affect firm outcomes? Causal, right, argument here. And I find big trade-off. Firms are more stable and they're more profitable. Employees are performing much better, but they're growing more slowly. And I wanted to understand what is the driving mechanism behind it. And I'm looking at the relational contracting, which in a sense is providing a stability for employees through these economic cycles, but firms are being less flexible to adjust to this rapidly changing economic condition. Now, the intuition behind it is that if I am promising somebody to take care of them in good times and bad times, next time if I want to grow my firm and I want to hire more people, now I have to think twice. okay, what if, can I afford to hire this person if bad times come? Because if you break promises, then it becomes, the promise is worth nothing, right? So for example, you hire a lot of employees, you make all these promises, bad times hit and you have to fire some of them, let them go. What's gonna happen to the remaining workforce? They will not believe your promises anymore. These investments in relational contracting, health insurance, these are not trivial investments. These are hard to reverse, right? So all these investments then become for nothing. So you don't get return out of it because people are not gonna, your employees are not gonna trust you anymore. They're always gonna be fearing that they're gonna be next, right? So they're gonna be always keeping their options open, so to speak. They're not gonna commit to your organization as much as they would. So employee benefits are not really one-size-fits-all prescription. If firms are in a stable environment, so the environment matters. So if you want to grow, right, if you're pursuing high growth strategy, then you want to think about, do I want to be flexible to grow? Or do you want higher performance out of my employees? That's the basic, trade-off here. So either you build fantastic relationships, strong employment relationships with a firm, and be very cautious about expanding or responding to market changes, whether they're good or bad, or you say you forego, you take a risk on, I guess relational contracting, and we can deal with, become more transactional in our nature within the firm, rather than more this cohesive culture. But in return, we can be rapidly responsive to market changes, rapidly responsive to competitive pressures, hire more people, fire more people, change composition, make changes easily, right? So it doesn't become a constraint. Now, of course, I have to say this because, as I said, the study is in pre-Affordable Care Act. Now, Affordable Care Act is requiring employers with more than 50 employees to provide them health insurance. Now, once you have this optional option, I guess, the voluntary part of provision of healthcare removed from these firms, what does it actually mean now? So I could speculate, at least that the culture now, because you have to provide, it's nothing special, right? So the tool of relational contracting is not there anymore. So firms now have to think about other ways to build employment relationships, and for people who have to send their employees from, even those who were providing health insurance, if they have to send them to the exchange, then what they're doing is basically shifting their culture. And that's evident in the recent highlights of different stories of challenges that small businesses have in trying to adapt to Affordable Care Act. For example, it's saying, look, it's the same hesitation that I think most small businesses have, which is there is an element of workplace culture and bonding that you want to have, so that you have the kind of cohesive organization that everyone desires. This business owner is concerned that this option is now removed, and with the mandate. And that concludes my presentation. Hopefully, you have some follow-up questions and we can engage in more discussion about this topic.
Yeah, so your research showed that firms that were, I get it right here, firms that offer health insurance tend to have lower growth, higher profitability, and vice versa for the opposite. Firms that don't offer health insurance may have higher growth, but lower, higher turnover as well. Would it be possible for a small firm to actually take advantage of that and kind of find a tipping point somewhere in the growth and say, listen, we've gone through a high growth phase, now it's time to kind of pivot and offer health benefits, take advantage of increasing profitability per employee? Can you kind of ride that wave a little bit?
I think you could. I recognize this. When I say small, implicitly, a lot of people think it's young, but that may not be true. So if we are thinking about new organizations, how they're actually building this employment, their internal labor market, so to speak, the relationship with the employees, you can think about your prognostication of, okay, young firms will undergo rapid growth. In that sense, that's going to be really tricky because for young firms, it is riskier for employees to come and work for younger firms. So there's this trade-off, right? How can you attract employees who will commit to your organization knowing that it's risky without giving them this kind of a commitment or signal of, yeah, we believe in our future. We're going to invest in health insurance because we believe this firm is going to succeed. So this is a very tough strategic human capital, human resource decision that small owners and small business owners and managers have to think about very carefully.
Could you go back to the metrics of performance that you had in the very beginning? Is that possible?
Sure. Would you like to see the table?
The percentages, that was way back in the beginning, yeah. Profitability is what I'm interested in. That's pretty skimpy.
It is.
I mean, when you're
It is
measuring
in
apples
this
and oranges
model,
and pears
yeah.
and bananas, it's pretty skimpy.
So, in this model it is, I show actually much higher profits, upwards to 10% with more rigorous methodology. I just didn't want to bring that this isn't my, I guess, the low bound of my.
Well, the point I'm interested in, besides that, is that there's always an argument about social investing. They do better than non-social investing, and I would argue that the companies that make a lot of money behave better because they have money to spend. And so I'm wondering if the people that are profitable, let's suppose the number were 10%, so they're really a solid profitable difference. Are they profitable because of that? Is it causality or correlation? Or did they get profitable and they're more generous? Or did they get generous and become more profitable? That's the question I always
Yeah, so what we try to do here is, obviously that's a possible alternative explanation, right? Because we're doing well now, we can afford health insurance. So it's like this, I guess, virtuous cycle that you're going through. What we try to do here with more rigorous statistical methodology, we really try to account for previous performance. So we try to account for all the firm characteristics that would be, contributing to high performance, and try to control for those things, so that we do take into account any like special capabilities or resources or anything special that they have that is not playing into the difference that we're calculating.
Did any low profitability companies start offering health insurance and become high profitable?
That's a good question. That's a great follow-up study, isn't it? So that would be
This is my job in this place, so I'm picking out. We do this for everybody.
Good. I would say that that I see out in the marketplace, the biggest challenge I hear from business owners, small business owners, my average client is probably around 17 employees. They say, my employees really don't understand what I have, what I offer, the cost. Because, I hear it all the time. When an employee leaves, they say, oh, wow, my COBRA is so expensive. I said, I want to make sure you know, your COBRA is not expensive. It's that your employer's been paying it for the whole time. So there's the element. And then on the other hand, because of the Affordable Care Act, the unintended consequence in a good way, I think, is people are now trying to understand their health insurance like they've never had before. And so the other role is employees say, I really don't understand what I have. And so I take the onus not only in the insurance companies, but on the broker community, that we need to do a better job in getting out in the marketplace and making sure people, they talk about financial literacy, we need to talk about health literacy. I mean, more now than ever, so.
That's a terrific
That
point.
brings up-
Thank you.
That brings up a related point I was thinking of. Right now, we're treating health insurance like a commodity. The employer goes out, purchases it because of they're pooling their resources, they can get a better deal, and then offering it as a commodity. Has anyone ever looked at creating some type of an account similar to a 401k where they say, we're going to make a contribution, you do, and then we're going to give you the purchasing power to go out and pick one of 10 insurance companies. We're not going to give it to you. We're going to give you a portable system similar to a 401k. Yeah, versus
Right,
a
right.
defined benefit pension plan.
Yeah, Ted, I'm gonna address that hopefully partially. Okay, so they have this thing called the health savings account. I'll use the example of Reuben Brown. When my wife became partner at Reuben Brown, she let me read, she said, here, can you read my benefits? And I was shocked, because usually you offer dual, you know, I don't know if everybody knows what health savings account, I hope you do, but the key the Reuben Brown said, we'll put $150 every month into your health savings account. And it's more consumer driven, meaning that that's your money and you have to go out and spend it, whatever it is that you have. But they didn't have a dual account, meaning like they didn't have a typical account where you just had a fully insured. So that was amazing. They were forcing their employees to be more conscious that here's money we're giving you, and we want you to be more consumer driven. So I don't know if that helps
Yeah,
to answer,
that is.
but it's
And I
called
was
health
wondering-
savings accounts. It's,
I was wondering if smaller firms might be more interested in that,
Right, right.
in the ramp-up phase.
So in that thing, in that plan that you described, is it going to be very much employer type? Is it, or is it transferable across employers?
Well, it's a combination. It's still the employer being the matriarch or the patriarch as far as taking care of their employees. But then they're making them more conscious to say, here's free money we're giving. Instead of putting money in a 401k, we're putting money in your health insurance. And by the way, this is your money, and we will hopefully you're going to be more conscious of how you spend your money versus they found studies that if you have a low deductible, guess what they do? They don't shop. It's not my money. I'm gonna get the greatest and the best. You know, if you have a choice to get a Camry or a Mercedes, and it's not your money, what are you gonna do? You get a Mercedes. So that's the thinking. Hopefully that it's gonna be more consumer driven. So
We, in my small firm, we offered that as well, and we had 35 employees. We had one person sign up for it, and we had the people come twice a year and explain what it was, and they didn't want the accounting burden of having to figure out what it was, and we were gonna be matching what they were putting in there.
yeah.
And they still didn't sign up for it.
And I'll go back to Dorothy, but that really has to do with education and lack of it. It really is. It's people, and now I think because of being forced to, people now understand what a deductible is and co-insurance and sometimes, I hope there's no doctors in the group, but sometimes we make it so complicated that, people put up their hands and say, okay, what am I supposed to do? So,
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah, so.
I will say an alternative to that, I am an active HSA user, and there's a use it or lose it mentality though too with that. So I do wonder, because I'm of the age, I've already had my children, I'm fairly healthy, I do not need that much medical attention at this time in my life.
Yeah.
But I also use the HSA just as a preventative method.
Right.
And that use it or lose it mentality, I could tell you, I'm ready to spend a lot of money that I potentially would
Yeah.
not have used.
So I'm not.
I don't know if that counterbalances though,
Yeah,
the cost of insurance.
I'm not familiar with your plan, okay,
Sure.
because there's another element there. But when you have a health savings account, this is the law, remember those medical savings accounts, and now there's health savings accounts. Medical savings accounts, it's a triple tax savings, you probably know this. It's not a use it or lose it. You have it for the rest of your life. Health savings accounts, you can carry it for the rest of your life.
Oh,
So
we don't.
the old medical savings accounts were like that.
Okay.
And when the health savings accounts came about, by the way, it's a triple tax savings. You talk to your financial advisor.
Mhm.
It's before tax, it's tax-free, and when you use it, it's tax-free. It's phenomenal. And so that's hopefully is the future, is health savings account. But here's one other thing I'll mention is, they said that 72% of companies have incentives to wellness programs. You know how many people actually use it? 15. So my point is, it's about education. I mean, it really is, it's the onus on brokers and the community and the consumer to be better educated on health.
That's right. So I guess, to your point, to your question, what would be more effective here if the small firms want to emphasize this benefit that they're providing, that the significant cost and commitment that they're making, it is interesting that, you need to educate your employees about what it actually means in terms of funding. What percentage of your, annual revenue it's actually taking. And so making them, making it their own money and having it spend it, that is really, I think that's the best way to have it, consciously evaluate the value of money.
Sure.
Yeah. It's not some kind of amount. And I do agree, like, when I look at my benefits, like, employer contribution, I don't really internalize the amount, right? What I internalize is what I'm actually paying, right? On a monthly
Exactly.
basis, yeah. Even though the employer contribution could be 2-3 times that, right? I just look at it and say, okay, that's cool, but what am I actually paying, right?
Yeah.
Yes.
We often think of labor productivity and capital productivity, and I don't have capital productivity here. And I can imagine two stories. One is, I don't have a lot of capital, and so I need a lot more effort from the workers, and it shows up as higher productivity. Or, I've invested in a lot of equipment which allows each worker to be more productive. And so
Yeah.
those are different strategies.
Right.
How does that play out in your data, do you know?
Yeah, so if you look at the paper, there is actually a column. I just didn't want to go too much into detail about the complexity between substitution of capital and labor. But there is an indication that if I'm not gonna grow, my employment pool, then my goods as well, invest more in capital. So I do see higher capital investment in firms that provide health insurance.
That provide health
Yes.
insurance?
So it's indicative of the substitution effect that they're making.
Okay, so I can imagine as I get bigger and I start to use more capital, then it's gonna be in my best interest to offer health insurance
To keep the employees.
to keep the employees, once I get to that point. And then I might not grow quite as quickly. Is that the idea?
So the employment, growth is an employment growth?
I see, I see.
This is kind of separate from healthcare, but this is the first research where it referenced the 2008 financial crisis. And I was wondering how, and I mean this might be too theoretical, how do you account for the fact that basically the Fed offered a total financial shield? In other words, it interrupted the meltdown process and essentially put an umbrella over the entire financial services industry. Otherwise, those wages would have gone a lot further down.
That's right, that's right.
So you don't really have a true free market.
Yeah, there's no way for me to
Yeah,
calculate.
well, I'm not
that.
saying it,
But the good thing was the umbrella was over everyone.
Yeah, no,
So
I mean,
under the
that's what I'm
umbrella, what
saying.
happened? That's yeah, but without that, I don't know, I dread to think about it, so,
Yeah.
Sorry.
Thank you.
Thank you, Professor Sullivan, that was wonderful just to share that with the audience. I'm Dorothy Kittner, I head up corporate relations here at the business school. And our team manages this program, so a couple things I wanted to point out, as she was mentioning, there are copies of the paper outside if you want to take the entire paper, or if we run out, we can electronically send it to you. And some of the other papers that were mentioned in this whole Olin Award process, they're also available online if you want to take a look. We continue to have these series throughout the entire academic year, different subject matters, so we hope you come again, and if you have any additional questions, you can stay after and talk to Professor Solomon, or let me know if you have any questions. Thank you again so much.
Dorothy, I would add one of the benefits for the faculty is to get access to databases that you might have so they can study that. If you've got a database that's of value to her, I wish you would provide it if it's not confidential, because that's what they live on,
I do.
is getting real databases.
Yeah,
I can help you with
yeah,
that.
that would be great.
Sure, absolutely. Yeah.
And especially, I can keep secrets, so. I didn't identify this company, did I?
Yeah.
Thank you all, have a great weekend.
Say hello to Teresa.
I will, absolutely.
All right, sure, yeah, thank
Good
you.
to meet you, yeah.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you, Scott. Take care.
Great. What do you have?
Yeah, let's see it.